Welcome back to Castburgers. I'm your host, Eli Halpern. This episode is brought to you by Hone. Go to honeblends.com and use promo code Judaism for 15% off. First of all, I want to apologize. Facebook reminded me 7 years ago that for Halloween, I dressed up like a retard, Walt Jr. So sorry to the cerebral palsy community. I am for sure getting canceled. Well, I'm wearing a collared shirt tonight, so we're talking politics. You notice all the people telling you to vote are all Democrats? You know, I had a bunch of my family members like, hey, make sure to get out there and vote. You know, any vote you don't do is a vote for Trump. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely voting. I'm voting for Trump because I'm an asshole. And I'm not really, but I like annoying people. And my dad was like, well, I'm disowning you. And I was like, really? After all the shit I've done, that's where you draw the line? I really raised the bar for myself. Or lowered it, I'm not sure. So Joe Biden won the presidential election, I guess. So I guess we gotta all stop being racist now. Although Trump supporters are still pretty confident that we're gonna have a 2000 election Al Gore situation where they announced Al Gore was the president and then actually Bush became president. I guess we'll find out on what appears to be the series finale of America. You know, everyone's excited to have a racist out of office, but Joe Biden helped write the Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, aka the Crime Bill, which helped reinforce the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which had a huge focus on giving mandatory minimum sentences for crack cocaine as opposed to powdered cocaine, even though they're pretty much the same thing. And it's no conspiracy that crack was placed in the black communities by CIA as an orchestrated attempt to reallocate slavery into private prisons via the 13th Amendment. Read it. The first line is literally, no more slavery unless you're guilty of a crime. And Kamala Harris, who was a fucking cop and a prosecutor that helped prosecute these drug crimes. These two have imprisoned an astronomical amount of predominantly black drug offenders and, of course, tons of poor people that couldn't afford to fight the system, most of who were also black because, you know, systemic racism. You know, Trump said a lot of racist stuff too, but mass incarceration is not on his record. He's a terrible leader who re-exposed the existing racism in America, his lack of ability to understand how his off-the-cuff outbursts affect not only millions of Americans, but billions of people globally. So I'm not saying he's better, I'm just saying he's less racist. And that's not an opinion or a belief, that's a theory supported by facts. A lot of people like to interchange the word theory with hypothesis, which is wrong. A theory is an idea supported by many facts. It's still called the theory of gravity. It's not called the hypothesis of gravity. Yes, he said Mexicans are criminals and rapists, and he refused time and time again to denounce white nationalists and neo-Nazis. So I'm not trying to back him up. I'm just saying he wasn't personally responsible for the atrocities of mass incarceration that the government has been targeting minorities for since slavery was abolished. Would he have had he been a politician his whole professional life? Yeah, probably. But that's the reason he got elected in the first place. America wanted to see how a non-politician or civilian would run the country. I've always said it doesn't matter who's president, but this term really taught me that the job of the president is to keep America from ripping each other's throats out by carefully wording things as to not offend certain groups and maintain national peace, which for that, Mr. Trump, you have failed. You failed miserably. Another benefit of having a non-politician assume office is having the media constantly attacking him, which granted was not a hard thing to do. But at least that opens up the nation's eyes to what is happening in the White House. Whereas Biden's nefarious racist history, saying he didn't want black kids in school with his kids because he didn't want them getting education in a jungle, and his numerous sexual assault allegations, and even his son's fucked up life get consistently silenced to the point that social media platforms are flat out removing posts regarding them. Now, I think whether you're in a democracy or even in a classroom or at home with your parents, you should always question authority. Being appointed a position of power is by no means a mark of superiority or intellect. And if Democrats believe ACAB or all cops are bastards, why elect one as vice president? And side note, we all love dogs, but hate cops. So what's our stance on canine units? As far as I'm concerned, there's only one good cop, Chris Dorner, RIP. Read his manifesto, you'll probably agree. Now, Richard Spencer voted for Biden. Now, if you don't know who Richard Spencer is, he is an actual white supremacist. And by actual, I mean He says that he is one, and he admits it openly. Unlike, the rest of people that just get accused of being white supremacists, but they're not really. Like, I'm a little racist, but I'm not a white supremacist by any means. I'm an Asian supremacist. I mean, he really is one, unlike everyone else who's mislabeled as a white supremacist by people who don't understand that words have definitions. You really can't convince me that Trump is a white supremacist unless you have some hidden audio footage I haven't heard before. And no, tolerating racism isn't racism. Is tolerating homosexuality? I don't have a problem with gay people. Does that make me gay? What I'm saying is white supremacists don't hide their blatant racism, mostly because they're too retarded to know that if they operated in the shadows, they'd get a lot further. A lesson they could learn from the Jews. Richard Spencer is extremely vocal that he believes America should be a white-only nation and wants to peacefully get rid of all other ethnicities. And he thinks Biden is the man for this job. Yikes! Now let's talk voter fraud. There were 2 instances in Wisconsin and Michigan where the charts just shot up in a straight line, all for Biden. Now, Democrats say obviously that's going to happen because Trump was saying don't mail in, go in person and vote. And Democrats, which are more concerned about COVID, were saying stay at home and mail in your votes. Some Democrats also argue that voter fraud by mail is a very, very low percentage to the point where it's almost impossible. That I can say is complete bullshit. USPS is slow as fuck and is constantly losing my mail. I'm missing like several $100s worth of shit from eBay this week. You got to keep in mind, USPS is a government entity like the DMV. Would you describe the DMV as efficient? The Republican side, however, references Benford's Law, which essentially is an algorithm for reading or predicting graphs. Wikipedia says it is an observation about the frequency of leading digits in many real-life sets of numerical data. Essentially, I guess it's like the golden ratio of predicting data or something. But apparently it's important enough to have been admitted in criminal cases on federal, state, and local levels in this country. First of all, I'm pretty sure voter fraud happens in every election on both sides. Why not? They're doing every other corrupt thing. Why not have a little voter fraud in the mix? And the same people refusing to admit that the Democratic Party may have committed voter fraud in this election are the same ones that were so adamant that Trump did commit voter fraud in the last election. And the whole collusion with Russia thing turned out to be bullshit. After huge federal investigations, they came up with nothing. It turned out that Russia was just using social media platforms like Facebook to spread fake news, which is shitty, but it's totally legal. To me, it just makes sense that the government would be more likely to fraudulently appoint someone they can use as a puppet as opposed to someone who's just going to say whatever the fuck they want. The good thing about politicians being puppets, though, is they're only in it to advance their professional career. Meaning, for the most part, I don't think they have any personal agendas. And at a time in our nation where racial disparity is widely recognized as a huge issue, if Kamala does become vice president, it surely won't go ignored. And I do think she'll do the right thing because that's what her voters want to see. Like, I don't think Kamala was locking up black people left and right because she's racist. I just think she wanted to advance her career, which, again, is fucked up. But she was just trying to get to the next level. And she's kind of at the top now. So at this level, what she should be doing is reversing all that shit. Hopefully. Now, more importantly than federal government, we've seen a huge revolution in regards to states' rights. Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, and Mississippi all voted to legalize recreational marijuana. And Washington, D.C. just joined Colorado and the city of Oakland in decriminalizing all hallucinogenic plants and fungi. Oregon completely decriminalized personal amounts of all drugs, including meth and heroin and crack and everything. So it turns out drugs are winning the war on drugs. In 2001, Portugal became the first and only country still to decriminalize all personal amounts of drugs, which dramatically reduced violence, addiction, overdose rates, and needle-transmitted diseases such as HIV. And it's easy to ignore that across the globe. But now that we have Oregon here in our homeland, it's kind of going to be impossible to ignore the statistics and should pave the way for even more drug reform. This is big fucking news, guys. Much bigger than the presidency. The war on drugs was never against drugs. It was against groups of people. It's a strategic tool that's been used for decades to target and imprison mostly nonviolent offenders, and is arguably one of the leading factors in perpetuating systemic racism. If you get pulled over and your car smells like weed, that's probable cause to search your car, which will probably lead to an arrest. With marijuana being legal, that's out the window. Look, if Biden wins, I'll be happy because liberals complaining is way more annoying than the other side. But also, if Trump wins, I'll be happy that it'll really piss off liberals. But in conclusion, guys, I think we need to stop focusing on whatever old white douchebag has their billionaire's hands up their puppet ass flapping their mouth around and just appreciate the fact that our friends, family, and future children can probably grow up without the fear of getting ass raped in prison for smoking a joint. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been Castburgers. Like, subscribe, share, block me, whatever. Suck my dick. Thanks.